Thank you. Good morning or good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you are. And thank you, Catherine, for a great setup session. Fleet management is a perfect topic that we're going to cover with a panel, a great panel. You know, the overall theme is, of course, connecting the dots, and that's the connecting all of the different elements of the commercial vehicle ecosystem. Our panel is managing the dots. Yesterday we did making them, and today we're going to manage them, and how you take this whole ecosystem and make it work for the customer and deliver the results that the customers want as we make this transition from selling vehicles to taking responsibility for managing the transportation needs of our customers. So it's really it's managing, it's evolving the ecosystem, and we have the experts here that can give feedback, as they are the ones that are providing the direct contact with the customers and managing them. You know, people have asked me, I mentioned this yesterday, it seems like this transition we're going through is new, but it's seeking new ways to satisfy those needs, and at the same time to help move your business forward and make progress. So the last transition that we were going through was when we went from the horse to the automobile. And then very interestingly, the best example I can use of making and managing the dots was a Michelin tire company, who at the turn of the century in 26 was trying to develop better tires, and of course encouraging the use of customers to buy more tires. So they invented the Michelin restaurant guide, and they started giving people restaurant suggestions that they would use to try and drive more and enjoy their cars, because up until then nobody ever drove to a restaurant. They didn't even have the same access. So it's what we're trying to do now as we move in this new change to a different propulsion system and a different technology, is to find ways to better satisfy what customers want and at the same time move forward our objectives. So we've got a great panel here, and I'm going to introduce them by the length of time their companies have been in business. Because I think that the test of time is how companies change and evolve to meet the future needs instead of the past needs of their old organization. So we have Dan Bryan is here. He's the general manager of Ricart to Business. He oversees all of the business commercial vehicles center that they have. They're one of the top 25 Ford dealers in the country, one of the top commercial dealers in the country, committed to service. I think he just said like 83,000 square feet of service space, something like 35 lifts just for the commercial customers. Full mobile service there in Columbus. And the Ricart family went into business in 1953. So there's a lot of heritage there, and a good customer base, but more than that, it's a solid company. Adam Keane, who's the president, the owner of Allied Body Works, they're in Seattle, Washington. Adam is the past president of the NTEA. He's been very involved in the industry, has a great deal of knowledge, both from his company, from his family, and more than that, they're one of the premier body manufacturers. So here we get a dealer, and now we've got an upfit body manufacturer that's delivering products to customers. The next is Dave Nemerofsky. He's the sales channel manager for small business solutions for Holman. He's been there for years, and he came from the investment banking industry, which is a place to come from in terms of strategically developing new concepts for business and how to make money. It's a leading fleet management company, as I think everybody knows of Holman. They're an upfitter. They also have 58 dealerships in their organization, and they go back to, I think, 1924, when Holman became a Ford dealer. A good example of managing the dots. But the oldest organization we have is Norm Gilbert. Norm is the commercial manager for AutoNation Ford Memphis, top Ford dealer, top Ford Pro dealer. He's been at AutoNation Memphis since he stopped taking pictures and decided to enter the auto business. Memphis Ford was one of the first dealerships in the country. When Ford opened their first plant outside of Detroit in 1911 in Memphis, they also opened a sales office, which became Memphis Ford. So we've got a organization that's been consistent for a very long period of time. Okay, so that's the panel. We want to talk about I think the process of integrating all of these ecosystem pieces and how to manage the process of the customer. And I think we should start maybe with the elephant in the room. And that's really the elephant in the room is propulsion, the EVs. The day before yesterday, the U.S. Court of Appeals approved California's continued use of the CARB plan that will mandate, and it's not just California, it's 14 states that will follow California by 2035, zero emission vehicles for cars and light trucks. And they also begin for commercial vehicles from 2B to 8, it goes up to 44%. And world is coming in terms of regulations, but at the same time, we're seeing issues with the infrastructure and customer acceptance that's providing us some kind of some resistance. So a big part of this transformation is the change in powertrain. It's not just EVs, it's also the EV allows the vehicle a great deal more flexibility for customer needs and a lot of new information and issues. So why don't we go around the panel and talk about you of where we are right now on EVs and what you think we can do or how we're going to manage the commercial vehicle customers as we move into these mandates that are just facing us around the corner. And why don't we start with Dave?
Start with Dave. I'm sorry, I kind of cut out Jim.
Yeah, for Dave. I'm sorry. And I apologize. My wife is haywire. I've been on the phone with the Wi-Fi provider and they're going to probably burn my house down. But so let's start with you, Dave.
All right, great. Well, thanks for the opportunity to be here. Appreciate it. Happy to be on this panel with a bunch of great folks in the industry. From an EV fleet perspective, so my portion of the business within Holman, we focus on a smaller segment of fleet. So we kind of segment our fleet management capacities based on fleet size. So we have, the large fleets, the tens and 20,000s of vehicles in their fleet. Obviously, they have a different methodology and meaning behind any movement towards EVs. And then the area of the business that my group focuses on is the smaller fleet. So typically about 100 vehicles or less falls into my purview. So I think your general home service type contractor, that kind of style of fleet. So I think the answer when it comes to EV adoption is naturally segmented. So I'll talk about the larger fleet space first. I think obviously there's been a lot of talk about this for years and years. Regulations tend to drive as much of this as anything else. From the large organization, I think early adopters on the EV side was less on the use case and more seemingly in the sustainability play. What can I do for the environment? They have sustainability plans in place for the organization. They may have shareholders or stakeholders that that's an important factor to consider when investing into a company and part of their environmental strategy. That I think was the initial onset of, yeah, let's try this, let's give it a shot, see if it works. And then slowly there are actual use cases where it does make sense, and then there's use cases where it doesn't. But on the larger organization side, I think ROI was less of the factor on making any kind of switch towards EVs, and more of, let's give it a shot. It might work. We have the ability to test things out in certain markets and be a little bit more nimble. And hey, it looks good from a public relations standpoint. So even if it doesn't work out, maybe we chalk it up to a marketing initiative that we tried and didn't necessarily pan out, or it did. From the smaller fleet space, I think the adoption towards EVs is going to be much more contingent on regulations. Their budgets are tighter, so if the ROI isn't there from a smaller fleet space, probably not going to do it. Obviously, I think as the public kind of sees more of these on the road, they do tend to be more retail type specs where individual consumer would be using it. Obviously, there are pickups and EV vans, but they are a certain use case that makes sense with a repeatable environment that they go and see their customer base with. It doesn't lend itself too much for not having a plan. So I think the more that the small business can have a plan, a detailed, hey, I have a repeatable process. I do this every day. I have a route that my team follows. We know where we're going to be within a couple of miles at any given time. They can plan it out, and it could work for them. But I do see it coming. Obviously, it's inevitable. But I think the adoption will be much slower on the smaller end. But happy to kick it to the other guy. I want to talk so much.
Well, and it's interesting, but met with Ford the other day. They said 60% of their vehicles, commercial vehicles, are to 1 to 10 size fleets, so that you're zeroing in on the bulk of the volume.
Mm-hmm.
How about Adam, from your point, and how it affects the development of your products, but more importantly, what your customers are going to need versus what they want?
Well, just like Dave, thanks for having me on here. And yeah, I think EV is such a loose term, right? And I think sometimes we think about that and we don't consider all that it means to the commercial vehicle market. So we get lumped into a lot of conversations that have to do with light duty vehicles and trucks. And that's important to understand because a lot of our commercial customers are utilizing those vehicles. But at the same time, when people say EV to me as an upfitter, I look at it in sort of a broader spectrum, right? EV is electric vehicle, but how do we get to zero emissions, not just when they're driving the vehicle, but also when they're utilizing the vehicle in different ways? So a lot of the conversations that we have with people is how are we working into those smaller fleets right now, to see what they're doing and how we can take away some of the like idling, for example. How can we start stair stepping them into something so that they're more familiar with that type of operation once we go full battery power, whatever we go into, right? I think a lot like Dave said, and a lot like you said, you brought up the the move from horse-drawn carriages to vehicles. I think of it just like any technology. When all of our businesses are fairly older businesses here on this panel, right? We didn't have computers back when we started, and we didn't have computers for a long time. Now, can we imagine a world in our business without computers? So I think the need for the vehicles is always going to be there. The need to do more out of a site that is happening, like a service industry. They're going to someone's house. They need to get to there, and they need to have their tools available. Sometimes they need that vehicle to do things for them when they're there. So that's going to continue, and I think adoption is just going to naturally start occurring as technology increases and as that ROI increases. So Our philosophy as an upfitter, and I think it's a philosophy that is mimicked by a lot of dealers, vehicle dealers as well, is that we got to stay educated and on top of it and find those scenarios like Dave was saying that, it makes sense in certain use cases, and then start adopting it there. And as that occurs, more and more use cases are going to become available because the technology is going to get better, or we're going to learn things of how to adapt that into what those other customers are doing. So, it does create, I don't think it creates any real new and unique challenges to us as an upfitter, because it's like anything. As new technology comes out, we're adapting and we're learning. And so as long as we're comfortable staying with educating our people, it's just, in some ways for us, it's another platform and it's another opportunity to build more advanced pieces of equipment.
You make a really interesting point about the level of technology. It's probably like watching the Wright brothers plane and not being able to imagine that there'd be a 747 one day, that there's advances coming. And, the point about idling with an electric vehicle, you're not just using cost, but you're using up the range. So I guess there's another element to it. Norm, how about from your standpoint, in Memphis, what kind of adoption do you see, and what kind of feedback are you getting from customers that are currently using EVs?
In my market, it's a smaller market compared to some of the larger cities across the country. I would say that for commercial customers who are very accepting of EV technology, they're much more willing to put it into real world applications and learn the technology and applications as they go. For folks who have only gasoline vehicles and they're interested in the technology, then it's an involved conversation I like to have to be sure that the vehicle fits their needs. So if you don't have the right tool for the job, you're not going to do the job very well. So no one's going to be wanting to jump out of a vehicle that they know can do the job into a vehicle and they're not sure it can do the job or it won't do the job. And that's a lot of outlay of a capital to get into something to try to learn it, have a horrible experience, put it down and never come back. So when it comes to adopting EV, for those, you need to educate yourself and work with a dealer who understands the technology. And on a commercial side, someone may really like an electric van, but if the range isn't going to allow them to do their job on a single day's charge, then it may not be the right vehicle for them, because now you're asking an operator to have to stop in the middle of the day and top off the battery and put a little bit extra charge in it to get to the end of the day. Well, that takes time. And then anybody who's managed a fleet or has a fleet of their own know that just to get the drivers to be sure that the vehicle is getting scheduled maintenance is hard enough. Now you're going to be asking them, don't drive it to zero. You got to stop, charge it. So you got to find the charger, get it charged, move on with your day. And that sometimes is a big ask. And that may be the lowest common denominator for adopting newer technology. But at the end of the day, it has to be the right tool for the right job, whether it's EV, whether it's an upfitted body, in any business setting. It's got to make sense. It's got to make financial sense. It's got to be a stair step to get you to grow the business. No one wants to be in business just to make the same money, do the same work year after year. Everybody wants to succeed. And I think EV is a good way to do that for those that it makes sense to do.
That's great. That's a good point. And Dan, that brings us to, from your standpoint, if the requirement is to buy an EV and the customer is reticent, what are you doing, or how can you sell, or how can you educate or provide other services to make the EV work in their application? Dan, are you still there?
Yep, sorry about
Hello?
that. Yep. So I think I
Sorry.
would say let's go back upstream a little bit. I think the first thing is these businesses they're in business to make money. And I think, there's going to be this giant hesitancy right now when you talk to a customer and he says that, that vehicle makes him $2,000 to $3,000 a day. And when you start thinking about what it may cost them until we have really good solutions for them, I think it's going to be a challenge. And I think that there's all these things that go into that. I think I've talked about the changing fleet manager, the guy that, and I don't mean to disrespect anybody that's 60 years old, but he may be, have 5 more years of work. And does he really want to go through all the pain and headache to make that transition? So I think there's a lot of factors that go into all of this. I think one of the biggest things to, and everybody's talked about, I'm not going to repeat what everyone said from an education standpoint and, looking at use case. And I think those things are all important. And there are use cases in some aspects. But I think, to your question, what can we, what do we look at or what do we use? I think it goes to the fleet management, the telematics piece, because I think so many of these businesses, and I think that Norm would agree with me, that people are more educated, coming in, just like on the retail side. I think they're more educated about what it is that they need. They have higher expectations. But I think the biggest problem is that, the majority of these businesses don't have a plan. 90% of them don't have a plan for what it is that they're doing. And I think for us to partner, there's a lot of collaboration discussion yesterday on the panels, a lot of the collaboration piece. I think it's a great time for us to solidify who it is, kind of who we are and what we are, to help them make a plan for their business. And if it's EV, if hydrogen comes along, or, in Adam's world with, upfits, some of the things that come to mind, even with that, when you think about idling, how many of these guys use these vehicles and they sit and idle, doing work, whether, they don't have heat, they don't have, AC, on a 90-degree day. I mean, there is a lot of obstacles, I feel like, to overcome. But I think that, the thing that we can't lose sight of, and I'm thankful that we have the power boost, and it's funny how hybrid is starting to come back into the discussion again, and I think there's some great applications there, to satisfy what someone may need. But I think fleet management, telematics, build a relationship, use case, all those things, and everybody's talked a lot about that already, so I'm not going to go any further with it. So
That's a good point. The hybrid has a position. I've been a strong supporter of hybrids for a long time, but then you get into the versus the engineering, and then it starts to change complexion of the regulations. But the regulations are what we have. I'm curious from a standpoint of this transformation, and Dan, we'll stick with you for start this question. How are the manufacturers or other suppliers of systems for the dealerships, how are they helping you with fleet management? I mean, is there the word fleet management, and Catherine had a good discussion on it, and of course, Dave is the expert, but what is your view of the use of the fleet management systems or processes where the OEMs are giving us, and how do they work for the customers? How do they work for you? And then what will you do? How will you use them, or can you? Because I think there's some issues there.
I think there's still a lot to learn, as we talked before, and Dave commented as well about the fact that, you have, I think for the manufacturers to get into it, it's kind of like moving or turning the Titanic, with what it is that we do. I mean, they're learning along the way, we're learning along the way. But I think, one of the best successes that we've had is actually helping to, on the smaller fleet, is to actually help them with the fleet management. And what I mean by that is help them with scheduling, help them, we're fortunate to have the mobile service fleet that we do, to be able to go to them to do the services that they need. Because we all know the driver that, pulls into the service department that his check engine light's been on for 3 weeks. And in the meantime, he's cost the company additional money because he can't stop to take time to get it fixed. And so I think for us to help them, and I said it a minute ago, the relationship side that we continue to solidify. And I had a customer that we piloted when these products first came out from Ford, to where, I looked at their spend, same time frame last year to same time in 23. And let me tell you, the money difference that they spent because we were helping them. So we won, they won because their vehicles are now staying on the road longer, making them money. And I think, looking at it from that standpoint versus here's a product and, we'll see you when you need service. We have to really collaborate with them to help guide them because, a customer many years ago used the term digital dust. And we all know that we all get reports every day, but it's like how many of those reports are really actionable reports that can help us operate our business? Well, I think it's the same thing with, all of the fleet data, the telematics data, that we can provide. But I think if we can help them and partner with them, I think it provides a greater relationship opportunity in the future with that customer.
Yeah, and I think some of these programs help, but the point you make about the OEMs is that I think there's a entrepreneurial solving problem element that the dealers provide, the fleet managers provide, that they can't, and that they should do their job and make good products and let you take care of the customers.
Yeah, we have
in
the
this
relationship
transition.
with them. And ultimately, that's what drives everything is the relationship.
Norm, how about your perspective on implementing the programs for fleet management? And I assume probably AutoNation may have some of their own processes in addition to those that you get from Ford Pro.
Mobile maintenance is certainly one of them. AutoNation being the largest auto retailer in the country, they can take on a lot of things that sometimes the OEMs were doing, and now you've got an auto retailer doing the same thing, mobile maintenance being one of them. So AutoNation sells more than just Ford, so mobile maintenance from AutoNation can work on any vehicle. A Ford mobile maintenance from our particular dealership concentrates on Ford, can do other vehicles, oil changes, tire rotations, and so on. But it's to have the tools that Ford makes available to commercial customers is outstanding. It's like drinking from a fire hose. From my perspective, trying to explain and show what's capable to a commercial customer is like, this is what Ford offers. This is how you can implement it into your business. You can baby step your way into it. And it's powerful stuff. And for those companies that are large enough that have a fleet manager and they can use these tools, it starts to pay for itself immediately, not only in the bottom line, but in customer satisfaction and employee satisfaction. I can easily connect the dots and show, okay, well, this employee is producing better because he's got a vehicle he's not fighting with, or he's able to get from A to B more efficiently. And the fleet manager is just, over the moon. What would take spreadsheets and spreadsheets to do, you can do in a web portal by clicking a few buttons. So there's more data than they will probably use, but for those who want to dig a little deeper and get more into the numbers, if that's what they like to do, it's there for them. And for those that just need to know when it's time to get an oil change, it can do that for them as well. So whatever level that they want to come into can help them work with their fleet, and it's scalable. And there's always support from me, their first point of contact, or I hope their first point of contact. And then there's also Ford. So the relationships is always paramount when it comes. I always like to say we're not in the car business, we're in the people business. So I want to be the person that they call first to say, hey, how do I do this? Or I need a new vehicle, or what do you think about me going electric? Whatever the conversation be. I'm not seeing them just every couple of years when they want to buy a vehicle. I'm talking to them on a pretty regular basis. If not them calling me, I'm reaching out to them to be sure that they're taking advantage of the programs, that their fleet's in good shape. If there's not a dedicated fleet manager, then I sort of take on that role to some degree to say, hey, I noticed this vehicle's getting a little older. Have you thought about ordering something else? And if so, working with folks like Adam to say, what do you have on the ground? I need to get an upfitted truck. So the timing is such that when they're ready to pull the trigger, I can fulfill that order pretty quick and not waiting till something's on fire and trying to put it out.
Yeah, anticipating and planning ahead. And the other point that you and Dan both made is that, I guess, you can help the small fleet customer, and that's what Dave does, enjoy the benefits that a large fleet operation has. They have 10,000 vehicles. They've got a whole organization that's managing their fleet. Well, for a 3 or 4 unit operator, now they can have many of the same aspects that the big ones have. Adam, from a standpoint of from your eyes, both as an upfitter, but your perspective on the industry in this area of fleet management issues, one of the challenges is as an upfitter is that you're a single provider, but you have to integrate with all of the other parts of the ecosystem.
Yep.
How do you do that, and how do you see application of fleet management?
Well, as I was listening to Dan and Norm talk, it's what's going through my mind, and I know yesterday there was a lot of talk about collaboration and what that means, and I think fleet management at its core is really collaboration, right? And so there's collaboration, there's vertical integration, and as long as those two things are kind of symbiotic, right, working together, that's a really good thing. And so what I mean by that is fleet management is taking the information that you can gain off of the vehicle or off of what you know about service, and giving that to those other customers, right? It's also, like Norm was saying, connecting with the upfitter. So I think all of those tools from either fleet management companies or from the dealer or from whoever, as long as they're collaborating with all of the pieces and communicating, are really helpful. Where they start to have issues is when that doesn't cross over, where you leave one part of the equation out of it. And I think those are some of the challenges that some of the tools face at times. So when someone jumps into that space and doesn't quite understand the full scope, that's where you can start to identify sort of what the holes in that tool are. So I think, for us, we utilize some of that same information, and we share that with the dealers, or we share that with the end user. One thing I would suggest for people to look up, and it might be kind of hard to do, but one of my favorite graphics that I remember from the NTEA board was the graphic that NTEA produced that is a path to market graph, right? Or graphic. And it shows how complex and different our industry is, in that I could be the point of contact for that end user or the fleet manager, or Norm or Dan could be, or Dave could be. There's a lot of different paths, but yet we all need each other to get the customer exactly what they need. And there's a lot of moving pieces there. So I think everything that we've highlighted in this last little thing just kind of comes back to collaboration, getting the customer the information that they need from all the different pieces that go into creating a work-ready vehicle for themselves. So I think that's just kind of an over.
Have you seen more collaboration or upfront communications with, for example, the OEMs on product development, or with the dealers in terms of servicing or providing support, or distributors?
So I think we see waves, like anything. So I think we've definitely seen an increase in collaboration in some things and a decrease in collaboration in other things. I think another NTEA report that was really telling was they did a growth study years ago, and one of the questions in there was, about the level that you feel you collaborate with as a distributor. So it was very, very personal to distribution and upfitting. But if you felt like you had collaborated more with your manufacturers and dealers in the previous year, and all the people that said that they had collaborated were the ones that showed the highest amount of growth. So yeah, I think there's increase. We see it with sharing of data. Different OEMs are providing more information to us and more ability to request things to go, to tie in with the vehicle. I think A lot of that has to do with technology changing. There's a lot more that all of us can do. So when we were talking about EVs before, just with tying into the vehicle, I mean, we have a series of vehicles that we're doing now that we track and service all over the country, where we can log into those vehicles and we can diagnose the aftermarket equipment that's in them to see what's going on with our equipment and how it operates. That wouldn't be possible if we were still utilizing sort of old technology, right? We're now being able to track everything into a central system and know what's going on. So with that, we can share with, in this particular case with Mercedes, or with the end customer, what's going on in those vehicles so that they can start to adapt and change. And they've been very open when you can provide detailed information about how it's affecting customers. I think OEMs and dealers and everyone else are way more into collaboration if you can provide them the data that supports it.
No, that's great. That's data, another topic that we can talk about, because that provides the collaboration as the data path and the info. Dave, from your standpoint as the fleet management system company, how do you see the current level of synergy and collaboration, and how you're solving that problem yourself with your customers, and I guess with the dealerships you own? But what do you see are the challenges that we have going forward to complete this integration of fleet management, not just as a company, but for the industry?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I'm gonna hopefully lean on some points that everybody mentioned, but I think fleet management means so much to so many different people. So some people, telematics is what they think fleet management is only. GPS device showing positioning of where your vehicles are, being able to know trip history, start, stop, hard braking. To them, that's, hey, I'm doing fleet management. Some people, it might be using just a system to track inventory, or just to, maybe they're using a fuel card, and to them that's fleet management. So I think to a lot of different people, it means so many different things. To Holman and to other fleet management companies, and hopefully to most people on this call, fleet management encompasses all of that. And I think that's where we come in, from upfront acquisition of the vehicles, ordering direct from the OEM or through dealer partners, arranging the upfitting, getting logos, decals, or anything onto the vehicle that needs to be completed, helping to manage the fleet through fuel and maintenance and telematics, and managing when to replace vehicles is all encompassing of actual fleet management in totality. So I think if you're missing any one of those components, it makes managing a fleet much more difficult. The more that you're able to, manage the dots, I guess you could say, is what we're calling this, the more effective I think you can be in running your fleet. And I think our role, all of us here on this call, becomes much more important than it has been maybe even just as little as 5-10 years ago. The role of a traditional fleet manager in a lot of organizations, regardless of if it's small or big, has kind of diminished or even gone away. The role doesn't exist in many cases, and it's whether it's budgetary reasons, whether that organization doesn't see that it's necessary, and it had fell onto somebody's role, whether it's an administrative person, somebody from accounting, somebody from procurement. No fault to them, but they're like, hey, you're doing this now, figure it out. So their level of knowledge around the industry wasn't what it once was, of somebody in control of managing a fleet. And we see, which is no surprise in most organizations, fleet is the top 2, top 3, 2, or maybe even the top spend when it comes to just overall spend through an organization. So it's a very important piece to overall, overall effectiveness. So I think that's our role in managing all these different pieces. I think is very important.
And do you have, because of the dealerships that you own, have you integrated the fleet management with some of those dealerships customers?
Yeah, we have.
Because I obviously.
So Adam mentioned it best. The vertical integration from, we have our own dealerships. We have our own upfitting capabilities, and we are a fleet management company. So being able to control as much of the customer journey as possible, without relying on, other folks to do it, allows us to have a little bit more control, agility, cost control, timing control, plan inventory, things like that. So we've certainly tried to leverage that within our own organization as much as possible. But obviously there's things that we can't do within our own organization. So doing that same kind of thing with our partners is very important too.
Yeah. So that kind of interesting point. Dan, if we can come back to you, I'd like to get your perspective on this from fleet management, but for the service support, because that's something that you've been focusing on. And that is, how do you integrate the service requirements with making them efficient use of the assets and getting the vehicle back on the least expense? And how do you do that also with the upfits, where there may be a problem in upfit that is being blamed on the vehicle, or the vehicle being blamed on the upfit? How are you managing the service needs of your commercial customers, Dan?
Trying to figure out how to say this in the fewest amount of words, because there's a lot of what you just asked there. We'll start with the fleet management side of it. I think and I brought it up already, I think the opportunity or the ability to be proactive, and Dave talked about it before, and I've talked about, if I've told this story once, I've told it 1,000 times. Years ago, there was a customer that the 6-liter had its own inherent problems, and I asked this fleet manager, they had 50, 60 trucks. And I asked him, I said, how are you keeping track of all the maintenance? And he looked at me and went, and I knew the answer before he even asked, and so in seeing that and realizing, I said it earlier, nobody has a plan. So I think for us to have a plan and communication, whether it is with a fleet manager or if it is, kind of the lead, guy in whatever business, the foreman, so to speak, but having that plan and just communicating with them and trying to be proactive and having foresight, that seeing that, you're 500 miles away from your next service, or, hey, there's a recall that came out. And I think for us to have access on the backside of those tools to be able to see that and to help them better plan so that the vehicle's not down and it's up making money, or if the guy's going to be 100 miles away, for the next few weeks, to do it on a weekend or whatever it is. I think it's just, we have to be proactive. The dealers have to be proactive with doing that. And Dave said it as well, and I was thinking about it, the fleet management means so much to different people. And so, from our perspective, what we're trying to do is collaborate with them to make sure that they are thinking about these things. And that's where, the opportunity to develop that relationship and make them even stickier to us. I think about the total cost of ownership. Honda started this, I believe it was in 06, started marketing total cost of ownership that they had, to justify their pricing, for maintenance, for the price of the car. And so when you think about the total cost of ownership, I mean, that's what we're trying to look at and trying to help them save money, which seems crazy to think about, but that's what we're trying to do with the fleet management piece. But you've got to be proactive with it. And, we're not trying to be the company that, they call us for an approval. We're trying to be the one that's actually providing the service for them to keep their trucks on the road. I don't remember the second question you asked me.
Well, on the with the upfits or alterations to the vehicles, if there's a problem with them, the distributor, do you have service capability to fix the whole thing, or do you have to get that fixed somewhere else?
I think the first thing is we have the capability to do some of it. Some of the stuff that, and we are more proactive today with all of our upfitters. I mean, we meet with them on a regular basis to ensure that we're aligned with, where they're going, what we're thinking, whether it's a vehicle ordering standpoint, or when we run into a problem, that they understand that, we can't let this plow truck sit when there's 6 inches of snow. We need to fix this thing. And so I feel like, we're very fortunate to have the number of technicians, and those guys can fix anything. And the relationship that we have with those upfitters is that, if we can either find the part or get the part from them, we'll try to do our best to make sure that it's up and running. But worst case scenario, we try to have, loaner vehicles available for those customers just the same, because we can't let them sit.
Yeah, that one-stop fixes everything need that some customers are going to have. Norm, from your standpoint on service, how are you seeing the transition? And then what have you done in your service to better serve the commercial customers' needs as a fleet management process instead of just a transaction?
Certainly using the tools available from Ford related to telematics is a huge leap forward. With commercial customers, if they want to grant a Ford service department access to their vehicle, like what Dan was describing, then the service advisor can see the truck in real time, get notifications on the truck, and know that something's happening, and then pick up the phone, send an email, say, hey, I noticed there's a recall that just came, or you're 500 miles from an oil change. Let's go ahead and get that taken care of. Get an appointment set up so the vehicle is out of service for the shortest amount of time. Best case scenario, the work is done when the vehicle is not in service. So after hours for the company, mobile maintenance can certainly take care of that if the dealership wants to take on working after hours to accommodate the business customer, which is out of the norm, but that's something that I'm trying to get our service department to be thinking about, which is what does a commercial customer need versus a retail customer? And our needs, commercial, are unique. And every service department that can sort of realize that there's low-hanging fruit there that won't tax them anymore, put them out of shape in any way to take care of those needs for the customer, it just pays itself tenfold back to the service department, because if the vehicles aren't on the road, they're not making money. Well, let me find a way so it's in service the shortest amount of time so it can get back on the road. And the tools are there for those people that want to avail themselves of it, whether it's the service department themselves or the operator or the business owner. They can be proactive and then work with the dealer to say, okay, my truck is ready. When can you get me in, and what's the shortest time it would take to get that work done? Of course, there's outliers, which is it comes in for oil change and all of a sudden they realize there's something else going on. That's another issue. But the tools are there, the technology's there, the newer fleet managers or the newer business owners are able to incorporate them in such a way that it's going to keep their vehicles moving. And when Adam was talking about collaboration, not only is it collaboration between people, it's a collaboration between a person and technology. So there has to be an interaction with all of those things, other people, other technologies, to keep the bottom line moving upward, keep the business growing, keep the vehicles on the road. And they're in business working for the customer, whether it's HVAC, plumbing. Those customers are going to see the end result of those benefits of taking advantage of those collaborations, because if a customer calls and says, my pipe is burst, okay, we can be there on Tuesday, maybe Wednesday, our car is in for service. We don't know when it's going to come out. Versus my pipe burst, how quickly can you be here? I can see using my fancy technology that I've got somebody right around the corner. They can be there in 10 minutes. So the customer is going to benefit, the business is going to benefit.
The technology is sort of the glue that puts this together, that keeps the dots connected for collaboration. So, Adam, from your standpoint on service, do you have a pattern where the distributors do the service, or do you have dealers that are able to do the service on your upfit equipment?
So I think that, Jim, that sort of depends on what it is, right? So we kind of like Dan was saying, the most important thing is getting the customer back on the road. So if it's quicker for us to do that work, based on the vehicle location, the parts that are coming in, and the expertise that's needed, we would do the servicing or repair. If a dealer has the vehicle somewhere else, and they are capable of doing that work, then we're coordinating with them to do that work and helping them out at any time. But I think one of the things I was going to add to that we're starting to do more often than not is, especially from an upfitting world, service of vehicles, there's hundreds of thousands of vehicles that are similar out on the road. So when you're servicing an engine or certain parts, there's a lot of standard protocols as far as what to do service wise. Upfitting, yeah, there's a lot of similarities, but like if you talk to Knapheide about how many bodies they manufacture through their custom line, just understanding the unique differences that are in those vehicles, or the fact that we are adding multiple pieces to make a total solution, like Dave was talking about, for the customer. A lot of times it's a little more difficult than just having a set service guideline to follow. So what we're finding in a lot of our more complex upfits, it's hard to do with all the small fleets that don't have that many vehicles. But as we're getting the larger ones, I think a big thing that we're doing is really trying to empower that end user. So, for example, creating troubleshooting guides based on standard parts of their vehicle, from an upfit standpoint, which is something that's not out there as much. But for one particular customer, we have an entire secure login where the customer can diagnose what's going on with their electrical system in the vehicle, to try to fix it themselves, or put that trouble ticket directly to us. Then we coordinate with the appropriate people to have it fixed. So obviously we're definitely a regional company, but we're shipping vehicles all over the country. So being able to rely on other partners throughout, again, taking it back to the collaboration. I don't want to beat the dead horse there, but taking it back to that, having a customer be able to be educated, and trying to figure out how their vehicle works a little bit more, so that we can help coordinate getting that work done. So there's no real one answer there, Jim. It's kind of depending on the situation is how we're going to treat that customer.
No one size fits all, but I guess it looks like maybe you'll expand your coverage of the dots, perhaps, with some customers, by taking responsibility for more that your vertical piece of it.
Yep, absolutely.
That's your strategy for that. So, Dave, from your standpoint, in servicing, which is the key to two things. One of them, it's the profit, why you get into the business. You're certainly not making that selling up front. But secondly, for loyalty. In your situation where you've got customers all over the country, how do you manage the service process to meet the needs of these customers for zero downtime and lowest cost? What do you do, and how do you see what's needed that can change to make your job easier for service support?
Yeah, so we worked really hard over the last, we've been in business 100 years, and the last 80 of them from a fleet management capacity. We've done a really good job of creating a network of national providers. We have about 100,000 of them. They're the national account chains, but also plenty of dealerships, our own dealerships, as well as local independent shops. We do our best to use OEM recommended guidelines to provide all of our customers with preventative maintenance trackers that, hey, these are the services coming due. When they use our fuel program or telematics, or when they do get maintenance performed, obviously we're capturing the odometer. So we use that odometer and a time element to proactively recommend when maintenance is coming due. Obviously, if we can get a repair on the PM side completed before it becomes a major repair, that's always the goal. We provide a locator within our portal, so that if these drivers know where they're going to be that week, that day, that month, they can plan out within our network based on what services they need, and try to work that in systematically. We have both with our system, and we have about 300 plus ASC certified techs that are part of our call center that can interact directly with maintenance centers where our customers are going. A lot of these guys have turned wrenches before in their previous life, and got themselves out of the shop, but they want to stay in the industry. So they're reviewing repair orders for more, typically the higher dollar. For more of the streamlined preventative maintenance, we have some artificial intelligence that, when that shop uploads the repair item details, our portal validates that it makes sense within certain parameters that we've set up. We manage about 1.5 million vehicles from a maintenance perspective, so we have a lot of data points on these vehicle types, these odometers, this age, even down to this region. These are the repairs that should be taking place at this time. And if the shop's trying to put in a repair that makes sense, we approve it, off they go. If they're trying to put through a repair that maybe doesn't make sense at this time yet, or maybe was completed at another facility, we flag the repair. But ultimately, it arms the customer with a lot of information that maybe they didn't have before. They don't have that level of expertise to even make the decisions. And then even down to maybe more critical and major repairs, maybe we say, let's avoid this repair and let's replace this vehicle instead. Depending on how much life this vehicle has left, maybe it doesn't make sense to drop, a couple $1,000s into a repair and said, let's cycle this vehicle out, get a new one in. Hopefully we're working with them prior to that to know what their replacement patterns are, so we know, but obviously there's a replacement patterns have kind of been pushed aside over the last couple of years, just given vehicle availability and cost of everything. So I think the problem of extending vehicles longer than they probably should has mounted over the last few years for sure. But it's our goal to give data, actionable data. Dan, you mentioned the data is everywhere, but what can you do with it? It's our goal that we provide a platform for our customer base to just have this information at their fingertips to make these decisions.
That's great. Well, you've got the captain's chair to see all of the elements in one in terms of managing the dots, and that helps everybody else in the audience and our panel members to understand their piece of it and how they can plot going forward, so they can produce their own restaurant guide to find new customers and new uses and expand the business. So I unfortunately this could go on all day long. I think it's a great discussion, but I just kind of quickly like to just ask each of you, how do you see the year? What's your view right now of in a couple of words of how the rest of 2024 looks, your outlook in terms of your business? Dave, we'll start with you.
I can start. I would call it a rebound year. So I think COVID's finally behind us when it comes to supply chain issues. Vehicle dealership lots seem to be getting a lot more filled with inventory. Maybe Norm and Dan can attest to that. But I think a lot of fleets held off on replacing a lot of vehicles for whatever reason, costs. Maybe they get another year out of them. Maybe they were left with settling for a vehicle that they ultimately didn't really want or need. I think hopefully this year is the year they get back to being on a more consistent replacement schedule, planning out their orders so we're being more proactive again than reactive, and just getting the fleet into a healthier state. I think that all comes back this year as things seemingly regulate. Interest rates are hopefully on their way down slowly. Vehicle inventory is improving. Businesses, I think most of them are in a strong state where they can start to make these decisions.
Back to normal.
Hopefully.
Maybe a little bit. Maybe. Adam, how do you see the point of view?
I'm going to use the word balancing because I think what I see in the upfitting world is there are some with capacity out there right now, and there are others that are playing catch up. There's a lot of backlog, and so we're still dealing with some supply chain issues just because of the amount of business from our vendors or from ourselves. So I see this year as sort of a balancing for us. I think sales is going back to normal, but the kind of production work we're in personally, we're in sort of a catch-up year, and others that I talk to that are successful in the industry, there's a bit of that going on as well.
Great, thank you. How about Norm? How do you see? Is your business good? How do you see the year?
Business is good. This time of year in car sales and commercial sales is kind of a lull. But for the smaller fleets, getting inventory is easier. For larger fleets and government municipalities, it's still a little bit of a challenge, but it's getting better. Ford is not back, I would say, 100% to where they were pre-COVID, but they're certainly on that path, and every quarter it gets better. So all in all, I would say we're moving in the right direction.
Good. That's up it. Okay, Dan, you get the last word. And how does the year? We're running to the end, but I sure want to hear from you.
I would echo everything everybody's already said, from the upfitter standpoint, from the production standpoint, from the customers that figured out how to make it work over the last few years without the cost outlay of an asset, so I think it's good, and we'll leave it at that.
That's great feedback, and I thank you all so much. This panel, I could spend time with you just to learn. Maybe we should come up with an idea someplace to have a golf tournament between the five of us. It sounds like a mutual interest.
I want Dave on my team.
I'm in wherever.
And I want to thank, of course, Work Truck Solutions and Catherine and Aaron for providing this forum for the commercial vehicle ecosystem to learn and grow, and for all that is done. Appreciate your time. Thank you again for the audience for participating, and we look forward to spending time with you again at the next summit, which I think is going to be in October. Thank you.
We'll see.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thanks.